And welcome back to the James Bond Book Club here on Spybrary. Welcome back to David Craggs. How are you, David?
I'm very well, thank you, Shane. Very well.
And to Ian Douglas, second time appearing on Spybrary. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much, Shane. Nice to be back.
You are Chief of Staff, one of the co-founders at the excellent Hildebrand Facebook group where you talk all things James Bond. I really urge people to go visit the group, and I will add a link to the group in our show notes, which we can find at
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
spybrary.com/126. Today, so this fellow Fleming has written not a sequel as such, but a second book. We talked at the end of the last book club whether there would be another one or whether this would be standalone. David, you were kind of thinking there would be more.
Well, we were deluded because as we were having that discussion, what we didn't know was he'd already written it, Shane.
Ah, okay.
I mean, here we are a year later. Wolverhampton Wanderers have won the first division for the first time ever in their history. And we have the second James Bond book, but it was written before Casino Royale was published. And as we know, because we've all read it, it is Live and Let Die, but it was to be called The Undertaker's Wind, which actually I thought would have been a good title as well. But there we have it. So a lot's been going on in the life of young Ian. Just as we were discussing his debut, he was deluding us all because he already had one in the hopper, as it were.
Do we think that's blind optimism on his part, or do you think he just knew he was onto a winner?
I think he had a lot of confidence. Plus the fact he also had a day job, or he has a day job.
Yeah. But he must have had quite a bit of feedback from his editor, so he must have had a feeling that this was going to, Casino Royale was going to be a success.
Yes.
And I mean, what is interesting is that he's kind of changed the tone, the kind of direction of it. So he's taking a few risks here, I'd say, before Casino Royale was published.
In which way do you think the tone is different, Ian?
I think with Casino Royale, he's establishing a character. So a lot of the book is about establishing that character. There's not a great deal of travel writing in it. It's personally, I don't think it's quite as exciting as this. It's not quite the page turner. And obviously a big part of it is the casino scene, which is very well written, and I do enjoy it. But I must admit, I did enjoy it more when that was over. And you go into the chapters where he's with Vesper, and there's that whole kind of suspicion of what she's up to, and then obviously the ultimate betrayal and the suicide. With this, I think it's kind of moved on into a slightly different direction, which kind of feels a bit odd, given that he didn't know how Casino Royale was going to be received. So I think, good for him for doing it, and I'll put my hand up and say I prefer it to Casino Royale. Not a common view, I don't think.
Yeah. David, do you think there was a shift in tone in this one?
Definitely. I think Ian makes a very interesting point. For me, Casino Royale was a much more melancholic, noir, downbeat approach, which worked very well. We loved it. And he injected a lot of tension into the writing and into the novel. But with this one, it's virtually as with he's gone Technicolor. It's a much bigger canvas. It has a great mix of locations, much more action to it, much more color, and it's a riveting affair. Actually, it's a riveting affair. I think it's a development of the character. The character in the first book was more of a cipher, I felt, and this time, from the get-go, we're seeing a warmer character, a warmer James Bond, if you like, and it's a hot tale, no doubt about it.
I would concur with you, because for me, I felt Bond was very cold in Casino Royale. I didn't really warm to him. This one, he does become more human. And you see that, I think, in his relationship with Felix Leiter.
Yeah.
There's more of that in the book. I was happy to see Felix in the book and having his character, learning a bit more about him. And one particular scene that I want to talk about with him that I really enjoyed. And also his Bond's response to Solitaire is very different from his reaction to Vesper, who he thought was annoyance and being foisted upon him. And obviously he says was the effect of Solitaire's most beautiful woman he's ever met, which might have had something to do with it.
I think so. I think it definitely did.
I'm sure she was bright and everything else as well. But so in those instances, for me, he kind of came alive. And yeah, maybe we should get into the plot before we get into some of the characters. And you, as you said, Ian, you know, we see a lot more of Fleming's reporter's eye for detail, I think, in this one, certainly when describing the United States. There's a few funny things he mentions there, and also the way he describes his beloved Jamaica. But as far as just breaking down the plot, gold has been found in the US that's been brought, all pirate treasure, which is the authorities suspect is being used to finance the Soviet espionage system. Do you think this was influenced by, was there a real event, David and Ian, that we know of that would have inspired Ian Fleming to have come up with this idea?
Not to my knowledge, although Ian might have more information. I think that there are some real life experiences that Fleming injects into the novel in terms of the execution of the plot. But in terms of the plot per se, I haven't heard that Fleming himself has ever been involved with pirate treasure. But who knows, in the life of Ian Fleming, all things are possible.
It was an interesting plot line, that, though. You know, you've got the pirates, which obviously is tie into Jamaica because he wants to take us to Jamaica.
Yeah. No, I thought the plot was great, to be honest, because it's quite a simple plot, but it's a very intriguing plot. It's a very colourful plot. And it's a plot that allows for a lot of developments, particularly in terms of location and in terms of development of the characters, bringing on board some new characters as well, and developing the relationship with Leiter. Yeah, I thought it was it's a good plot. I mean, he's basically sent to investigate, as we know, this Mr. Big, who's got a pretty difficult real name, Bonaparte Ignati Gallia. And this guy, as we know, principally based in Harlem and in Jamaica. And his stock in trade is to harvest this gold that was the treasure of Henry Morgan, the pirate, in order to fund the activities of SMERSH and Soviet intelligence in the United States. The gold's been discovered in Harlem. The coins have been discovered there, and Bond is dispatched to New York, and so it begins. So I think the plot is a simple plot. I think it's a tight plot, and it works really well.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think from what I understand, Fleming was a big fan of pirates. As a boy, he read lots of novels about pirates, so it was just something he wanted to put into the plot. There's obviously a connection to SMERSH, which kind of gives the reason for why the Secret Service were involved in this in the first place. Because if it was just American gang activities, there would be no reason for the British Secret Service to be involved. But because they connect it to SMERSH, they know, Bond has a vendetta against SMERSH because of what happened with Vesper in Casino Royale. So that that's a nice way of tying the plot together. And I guess the voodoo element of it is just a nice way to demonstrate how Mr. Big controls the local population of both Harlem and Jamaica. So there's all these elements combined together. And as you say, it's a very exciting plot.
Yeah, and to add to that, with the Jamaica connection, they knew it would end up there, and obviously that was under British domain. Yeah, it's also what I like about talking about Mr. Big is I felt we got to know him a little more than we did the Chiffre. I love the backstory of Mr. Big during the war, was taken on by the OSS, worked as a dockhand in south of France, was going undercover, but then he disappears for 5 years. And the suspicion is that he met a Russian, a Soviet, and went to Moscow and trained. And next thing he pops up in Harlem as a nightclub owner. You know, there's a lot more color to this character, I think, as the villain.
Several strands to his personality and his interests. It's, you know, there's the voodoo, there's the gangland culture, the Russian element, of course. And he is literally a big character. You know, he's a big man. His head is twice the size of a normal head. He's got a heart condition, so his skin is kind of grayish, which sounds quite bizarre. But he is a big character. I mean, you don't really get to know much of his personality, but he's obviously impressive to look at. So I think visually, you can imagine him on a TV screen or a film screen, and it'd be quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he's a huge, as Ian said, he's physically a huge character. And I think really here, sort of Fleming has gone for the Fu Manchu approach to villainy, if you like. I mean, this is somebody that's physically impressive, horrifying to look at. It's said on multiple occasions during the course of the novel how intelligent he is, how good he is at controlling the situation. And his network in New York and his network throughout the States sort of speaks to that. You know, it's phenomenal. No, I think that he's really well cast.
But I also like how Fleming, this is not a superhero. He gives him a weakness. So he writes that he had no known vices except women, whom he consumed in quantities. He didn't drink or smoke. And his only Achilles heel appeared to be a chronic heart disease, which had in recent years imparted a grayish tinge to his skin.
Well, it's incredible how somebody that's got a chronic heart disease can have an insatiable appetite for women. But maybe that's because they were hoping he would die on a job, perhaps, you know.
What a way to go.
Yeah, what a way to go. But yeah, there were some paradoxes, I think, on the love scenes in the novel.
Yeah,
you have got a villain who is who consumes women in an insatiable manner, but yet Bond himself finds it impossible to make love to Solitaire on the train because he has a broken left finger. You know? I don't know exactly.
What an excuse!
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm not sure if my wife would wear that one. You know, I mean, how that came about, I'm not sure. I mean, particularly in view of the fact that his nether regions were sort of beaten to death in Casino Royale, but he came out all guns blazing shortly afterwards, where on this occasion he's had his finger broken and it stops play immediately.
But I guess that's because Fleming wanted it to have a happy ending, so to speak, so that that love scene would happen at the end rather than early on. So it kind of builds up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, but I in terms of Mr. Big, he certainly grabbed my attention.
That's great.
And I also wonder, knowing the little about Ian Fleming that I do, that somebody who doesn't drink or smoke, I can't imagine Ian Fleming really getting on with that kind of person. So did he deliberately
have nothing in common?
Absolutely. I think that's why he made him the villain. I think that's why he made him the villain.
And I mean, look, we may as well chat about the characters as we're here. So one of the things that I did smile at was the names that Fleming gave to some of Mr. Big's henchmen. So you got Teehee Johnson, Whisper, McThing,
Blabbermouth, my favorite,
Blabbermouth Foley, Sam Miami,
the Flannel.
How
do you get a nickname like the Flannel? Where does that come from? And McThing, I mean, that's just bizarre, isn't it? But they're great. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get Ian on the show and ask him. You know, that he probably knew people with those nicknames, right? The flannel. It sounds like the people you meet down the pub. Oh, don't mess with him. Or the flannel's just walked in.
Well, what is interesting actually is he did name the sub-villains in this epistle, whereas Casino Royale they weren't even named.
Correct.
But this time we've got a whole raft of characters that we can either cheer for, laugh at, or be horrified about.
Yeah.
I think that was a good development as well.
And Ian, you were saying that you'd read that Fleming had gone to Harlem and researched Harlem, and I just wonder if he was sat in a bar and he could just hear people with these nicknames because they seem so random to me.
Yeah, it is bizarre, the idea of Ian Fleming sitting in a bar like that or a jazz club, but apparently he did it. I mean, when I first read it, I thought this just seems a bit caricature, a bit odd, especially when you're hearing it in Fleming's voice, aren't you?
Yes.
So it's quite hard to read, but knowing that he actually did the research and he got it spot on with the vernacular, then you've just got to go with it, and it makes it more entertaining, I think.
Well, this book does read a bit like a travelogue in many ways, more so than Casino Royale. And I love the passages when Felix Leiter and James go to Harlem to go and scope the place out, and the descriptions in there. And again, it's Fleming's reporter's eye for detail. It really felt like the lads were going on a night out,
Love it. Yeah, well, that was
great. I mean, from the moment he lands in New York, I mean, it's great. And the way that he depicts New York, the way that he depicts the St. Regis Hotel, Park Avenue, he really captures the atmosphere immediately. And I felt that I was in New York with him and having that experience. And of course, the trip up to Harlem is interesting at the best of times. And once you go across 110th Street, it becomes a very different world.
Yes.
And that's precisely what happened, to Leiter and Bond when they went up on that fateful night to investigate Big on his own terrain. And I thought that was a really great moment. I also loved the moment in the clubs.
Yeah.
It had great atmosphere, and I thought he captured the vernacular perfectly, and you could really sort of feel the 50s jazz age as we know it today.
Yeah.
I mean, there hasn't been a lot of jazz in the charts this year. I mean, the biggest thing right now is Doris Day with Secret Love, but I think that there's a big jazz scene in Harlem. And that was perfectly depicted.
Well, you're absolutely right. When he first lands in New York, so just the way he describes the airport, and I know we've all flown and we can relate to this, that he wrote that at least an hour he thought of overheated, drab green rooms smelling of last year's air and stale sweat and guilt and the fear that hangs round all frontiers. Fear of those closed doors marked private that hide the careful men, the files, the teleprinters. And then he also goes on, because I enjoy the trade craft and how Bond sees the world as a secret agent. And he also wrote that how much he hates handing his passport over because he says anonymity was the chief tool of his trade. Every thread of his real identity that went on record in any file diminished his value and ultimately was a threat to his life.
Absolutely, yeah. It's extremely well done.
And when I was like, the name Idlewild, you just think, what a bizarre name for one of America's biggest airports. I mean, you just know that's going to be, some president's going to be, they're going to name it after some president in the future or someone, right?
Oh, they really should keep it. They need to keep that. It's a great name.
Yeah. And then for me, having been to the US, I think Fleming gets it straight on when he talks about how Bond is in the car going to Manhattan, and he writes about the exotic pungency of the road signs, soft shoulders, sharp curves, squeeze ahead, slippery when wet. He also writes the standard of driving, the number of women at the wheel, their menfolk docilely beside them, the men's clothes, the way the women were doing their hair, the civil defense warnings, in case of enemy attack, keep moving, get off bridge. And it's true in the US, you get on the road. I don't know how people drive because you're just hit with a flurry of signs everywhere. So I thought Fleming was spot on there. And, you know, the civil defense warnings, there was a massive civil defense exercise in the States this year, ready in case the bomb dropped. So, you know, you can understand why those warnings were there.
Yeah, which ties in with the kind of the perceived threat of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
It's a genuine fear, isn't it?
Absolutely. And and that's why they've obviously tied him into this Soviet threat. You know, McCarthyism is still going on. And fortunately, it seems to be waning a little bit now, but you can understand that fear. We mentioned Felix Leiter, and I think we should talk some more about him. David, how did you see that relationship between Felix and James in this novel?
Well, I told you actually last year that he would give an arm and a leg to be in this one. And I was proven to be correct. But independent of that,
how do you do it?
I think the relationship is different and is developed. In Casino Royale, he was basically there to facilitate Bond's card game with Le Chiffre and to bankroll him and to be there in a sort of supporting fashion. This time around, he's there to be the conduit between him and the FBI, because this is a multi-agency operation. And he's a full player in the game. And I thought that Fleming brought the relationship on extremely well with Leiter and really developed him as a character. Obviously, you know, we'll probably talk, or we are talking already about Leiter's fate in the novel, where he pays a very heavy price for helping Bond by investigating one of Big's associates in St. Petersburg. But rumor had it that Fleming actually intended to kill off Leiter in Live and Let Die, but the his American publisher objected, and so he kept him in the game. So I think that Leiter was well and truly developed during Live and Let Die, and I think we'll see more of him in the future, providing Fleming, you know, continues to write these novels.
Or we're going to see slightly less of him with half a leg and half.
Well, we'll be seeing less of him, yeah. But,
more of his personality, less of his body.
Yes.
Although you say,
sorry, Ian, go for it.
I was going to say, the great thing about Leiter is that because of the relationship with the two of them going out on the town together, they obviously provide perfect foils for each other. But you get to know more about Bond. It's like Bond feels at home with Leiter, just eating, drinking, hanging out together, you know, like two old buddies on the town. I really like that element, and I hope that continues throughout the novels.
And I like the way, actually, as well, that he depicted the FBI guy in
Dexter,
yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, he really, Fleming portrayed him as being sort of very straight-laced and very sort of up and down sort of character, which is precisely what FBI agents are, actually. Yeah. And it made me wonder if, because we know that that Fleming was in New York before the war, and during the war, I believe, as well. And I wonder if that had any, if he had any links or associations with the FBI over that period. And certainly, obviously, he was a friend. He became a friend, or is a friend, of Alan Dulles. It's interesting.
Yeah, because he has some, you know, sarcastic remark about them all wearing the standard issue raincoat, doesn't he? It's like
you can all spot them, can't you?
Yeah. And that's so, un-British, where it's
Yeah.
obvious who the Secret Service are. I mean, you never know here in the UK, but over there, they kind of wear it on their sleeves or with
Well, the FBI certainly do, yeah.
Yeah. Also, there is a scene that really, really made me laugh between Felix and Bond, where they're trying to make Bond seem more American. So they give him clothes that he's not enamored about, and they don't want him to wear his pajamas. They want him to sleep in the raw.
Yeah.
And then he was reminded to ask for the check rather than the bill.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I felt sorry for her at that point, actually.
To say cab instead of taxi. And this from Leiter: to avoid words of more than 2 syllables. Get through any American conversation, advised Leiter, with yeah, nope, and sure. The English word to be avoided at all costs, added Leiter, was actually. Bond had said it was not part of his vocabulary.
Well, I felt sorry for Bond actually when he was presented with
actually.
It's brilliant.
When he was giving the clothes in the St. Regis Hotel, I did feel sorry for him because everything was nylon.
Yeah,
there was no Sea Island cotton.
No.
He had to wear these terrible nylon shirts, and somebody bought him a dreadful tie clip that he had to put on. But he did get a Hartmann suitcase, which is actually quite an outfit, quite an item to cherish.
Is that the lightweight suitcase?
Sorry?
Is that a lightweight suitcase? Is it?
I'm not quite sure which model he had. I don't know whether it was specified, but Hartmann are still in business.
Right.
So,
good.
In 1954, so they've lasted a year.
That's good. That's good news. Yeah.
And we should also remember that Bond was given a military haircut and was told that he was a New Englander from Boston. And
Boston,
holiday from his job with the London office of the Guaranteed Trust Company.
Yeah.
What a legend.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think, though, that Fleming put all those elements in just to kind of like show what he knew about Americans and American culture? Was it really necessary, or just to add a bit more colour to it, I guess?
I think, although we're laughing about it, I actually think that is part of what makes or has made these 2 books so far so readable. Because he underpins a lot of his the movement, the actions of Bond, the life of Bond, the movement of Bond with brands. This thing is peppered with brands. Whether it be Solitaire's perfume, which he describes as being in the original first edition, which I have here. Because he sent me a very nice copy of the first edition.
Nice.
He describes the perfume as being from Christine Dior, Solitaire's perfume. It's called Vent Vert, but unfortunately for Fleming, it's not from Christine Dior, it's actually from Balmain. So he's asked the publisher to change it in future editions.
Right.
But the whole thing is peppered with brands, whether it be Leiter's Cord car in Florida. When he goes to Florida, Leiter's given a Cord car, which is a great car, by the way. A local GP friend of mine in Somerset has a Cord car, Dr. Jason Love. So that could well be something that features in espionage in the future.
Well,
so we see the advent of the Cord car, we see the Talbot Sunbeam Alpine, we see the Rolex watch, etc., etc.
Zippo lighter.
Zippo lighter comes in.
I still think, going back to this discussion, was Fleming having a giggle here in the way he's describing Americans? Because you mentioned cars, David, and there is Bond gets to drive an American car, which he describes as just a beetle-shaped dodgem, in which he motored along with one hand on the wheel, the radio full on, and the power-operated windows closed to keep up the drafts. He's not a fan.
Well, he has a lot to say about American food at some juncture as well. You know,
He
Mostly
does.
derogatory.
Yes, yeah.
Mind you, melted butterscotch.
Exactly.
I love that line. It sounds fine, said Bond, with a mental reservation about the melted butterscotch. Then he goes on to call it American cooking at its rare best.
I think he's got it about right, to be honest.
Yeah,
He's got it about right.
I mean, I think going back to this whole UK US thing, it's clear that Fleming knows a lot of Americans. I think he's just having some fun.
Yeah. Well, he's picking out the best and the worst, if you like, and I think that's entirely legitimate when you're writing.
And he
seems to emphasize the worst, though, doesn't he? He seems to have a certain disdain for the US, calling it El Dorado, and he worries about the kind of Americanization of Jamaica. He doesn't seem to be a fan, although he keeps going back, doesn't he? He's fascinated by it.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought of that. But yeah, he is. I always thought of him as a sort of fan of America.
But you can also have a love-hate relationship with the
There's
aspects you like, and an aspect like you talk about Jamaica, David, and it's got that rough edge, which you mentioned before. But I think also in this book, he does hype up the luxurious aspect of being a secret agent. In fact, he does say, he writes, that there are moments of great luxury in the life of a secret agent. There are assignments on which he is required to act the part of a very rich man, occasions when he takes refuge in good living to efface the memory of danger and the shadow of death, and times when, as was now the case, he's a guest in the territory of an allied secret service. And then, one morning he orders breakfast. And for me, right, this is Enid Blyton for adults. I'd like to order breakfast. Half a pint of orange juice, 3 eggs, lightly scrambled with bacon, a double portion of cafe espresso with cream, toast, marmalade. Got it?
Lashings of ginger beer.
That's the one.
It's a luxury lifestyle, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess it's compensation for his life, isn't it?
When he's not been obliged to dress up as a typical American. It is a luxury lifestyle, but
makes up for the torture.
And it connects to Casino Royale, where he says when he's on the job he eats well, because when he's at home he doesn't really bother.
Yeah. Well, on the location front, actually, we learn quite a lot, because we also learn where he lives in this novel, which is we didn't in Casino Royale. It's clear that he lives in Chelsea.
That's right.
We see that when he's driving off to headquarters for a briefing. And we also, in terms of the location front, learn a lot about America. We see, Midtown with his introduction to the hotel. We see him in Harlem, which I think he portrays very well. But then when they catch the train and they go to St. Petersburg, I mean, the way that he depicts Florida is really interesting. I find this concept of the oldsters in Florida, where he describes basically a town, if not a state, where people just go to see out the final chapter and play bingo and hang around in deck chairs, and he does a great job of describing certain elements of Florida.
There's that line, David. There's that line where he writes on, I think Solitaire is saying to Bond, on the East Coast, they fleece the millionaires. Where we're going, they just take it off the little man. Serves him right, of course. He goes there to die. He can't take it with him.
Exactly.
It's very odd, though, that it's Solitaire that's saying all this, isn't it? Because when I read it, it's like, well, Fleming clearly doesn't like old people. Perhaps he doesn't see himself as growing old, or he'll die before his time. But it's kind of like it's Solitaire who's saying all this, and the clacking of their false teeth and all this kind of thing. And it seems odd that it's coming from a woman who's about 25 years old, who would surely be a bit more empathetic. It's a grumpy middle-aged man that's saying this, but he uses her voice to kind of vocalize it.
But you say that, Ian, and it's a good observation, but then I think that makes Solitaire a more interesting character than Vesper, for instance, where she has these views. It's more three-dimensional than Vesper was, I guess. And
it just seems a bit unlikely to me, though.
But if she's been down there many times with Mr. Big, right, because his operations, and she's just observed this, maybe it would be something we'd say. I mean, if you keep going to Bournemouth, right?
No, well, there is a comparison with Bournemouth.
That's right, yeah.
That is made, actually, yeah. There is a comparison that Bond makes between St. Petersburg and Bournemouth.
But what do we think of Solitaire? I think it's good you brought her up, Ian.
I think she's described as one of the most beautiful women that Bond has ever seen. And she's interesting because she's some kind of psychic. She has these psychic powers. But apart from that, there doesn't seem to be a great deal to her. She's quite thinly kind of drawn, I think. And it's only when she starts moaning about the oldsters and criticizing, certain elements and certain people that you get more of her personality, which is kind of slightly bitter. And which is why I think it sounds like it's Fleming's voice, it's his views that are coming out there. So I don't think there's a great deal to her personality. She's had an interesting life, and she's obviously trying to escape from Big. And it's almost like it becomes too obvious that she's trying to escape from Big. How does Big not see this? The clues are there. So yeah, beautiful, but not too deep, I don't think.
That's a good point, because correct me if I'm wrong, in the first scene where Bond meets Solitaire and Big, she's got to, pull the cards out. Is he speaking the truth about his cover? And she says he's speaking the truth. But Big knows who he is.
Yeah, that's right. And he knows that Leiter is with the CIA. So it's pretty obvious that, Bond and Leiter are after him. And yet, he's convinced by Solitaire that, oh no, his story is true, kind of thing. It's a bit odd. I'm fine with it because it moves the story along, but it doesn't quite ring true, does it?
And also Fleming does explain how she has, singing lessons that she's going to, and that's how she's able to escape. So it wasn't that she escaped his lair, she's gone to the singing lessons and slipped off.
Gives her an excuse to get out,
Gone to the drugstore and called him. But again, what I like is, even though I think in this one, Bond is warmer to women than certainly he was to Vesper, he does tell her on the phone, if this is a double cross, I'll get at you and kill you if it's the last thing I do. So he's not messing about either. He's like, the trap.
He's not going to get fooled again. Once was enough in Casino Royale,
Exactly.
If you're part of the problem, you're going to pay the ultimate price. Yes.
But it adds a kind of element of intrigue, and that he catches the train, the Silver Phantom, down to Florida with her, and it does feel like he's still slightly suspicious of her. So it does add a bit of suspense to the story, I think.
It does.
I mean, it's obvious later on that she's a good guy and she's on his side, but to begin with, he's really not sure, is he?
Well, also having read Casino Royale, we're not sure.
No,
because he's
absolutely.
been done once before, and it's like, oh, I've seen this, read this before, and then I couldn't work out, and I know it's for the purpose of the story, but when I read it, because Leiter takes the plane, right? He catches a plane down there, and they put Bond on the train. Surely it should have been the other way around. They're trying to protect Bond, stick him on the plane.
So they'd already described a plane journey, hadn't they, when he goes into Idlewild? So now it's a reason to explain the train journey on the Silver Phantom, and I like that scene, I must admit.
Yeah,
really nice.
And I actually love, having done that trip, that he writes, when they go through Philadelphia, he sat down next door in the seat she had left and watched the grim suburbs of Philadelphia doing their saws like beggars to the rich train.
Yeah,
it's like
I've been there.
Yeah, when you go through Philly and Baltimore, so whoa. What did you think of the guy on the train who tips Bond off?
Samuel Baldwin, is that his name?
Yes. Well remembered, sir.
He's good. I mean, he's a good guy, isn't he? So
yeah,
he's
but why
fine.
would he tip Bond off? I mean, I know it's for the story, right? And we're ripping it apart a little bit here, but I'm kind of, all right, Mr. Big is this all-powerful, his tentacles are everywhere. This is a big risk this guy is making for somebody he doesn't know. Yeah. Okay, he's like, I don't want funny business on my train, but
Yeah, but he recognises a good guy, doesn't he? I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
So he's doing it for the right reasons, even though he's risking his life, isn't he?
Well, he loses his life.
Yeah, he loses his life. And that's quite, in a quite spectacular way as well.
Yes, yes. I mean, when the carriage is attacked, after they've disembarked, the poor chap loses his life. I think the part of that particular scene that worked was the fact that he was very proud of his train. He was very proud of his customers, and he wasn't going to have any gangsters coercing him into letting bad things happen to his customers. So I think in that extent it was acceptable, and it moved the story along, and I certainly enjoyed the train journey. You know, I thought it was very well done, and as Shane said, it was a great way of describing America as he passed through it. I also thought that he did a good job at sort of differentiating Tampa from St. Petersburg, if you like. When it's pointed out that Mr. Big has another base in St. Petersburg, and is sort of asked why, and it basically says, well, there's no crime down here, you know, so there's no police, so it's very easy to manage things,
to get away with it,
because the place is full of oldsters playing bingo, you know, and
baseball.
yeah. And I thought, you know, that part of it was quite credible, and there was certainly a lot of action in the book. I mean, just to sort of rewind for a second, I thought the action sequences in the club were great. I mean, when they're in the club and Mr. Big, the table goes down, you know, he finds himself downstairs, and he has the exchange with is it T.H. Johnson?
T.H. Johnson,
who breaks his famous left finger, part of Mr. Big's instruction. But then when they're taking him out to sort of ditch him in Central Park, there's the gunfights, and it's the first time actually that he fires a shot, because he didn't fire a shot in Casino Royale. But he takes 3 of them out there, you know.
That's impressive.
To make up for it,
yeah.
What I love about the finger scene, David, he doesn't just like rip a finger. He actually says, "Which finger do you use least, Mr. Bond?"
Sympathetic. He's a nice guy, really.
You know.
But there's also the scene which you don't actually see, but Felix recounts it, where Felix gets chatting. I think it's Blabbermouth Foley, and they get talking about jazz, and they find some common ground.
Yes,
it's like they become mates. So in the end, Blabbermouth has to smack him with a blackjack, whatever that is, just to sort of like do his job. There's a really nice scene that they become these friends over jazz.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and it's showing, you know, Felix's guile.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, getting that guy in his, I mean, he still gets clumped, but he doesn't get tortured.
Sympathetically.
And I mean, that's the other thing about Mr. Big, is that, you know, this is a guy who's a sadist, and he's done terrible things to people. So he's scary in that regard. He's not a caricature. It's like, oh yeah, this guy is gone in the head.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when we talk about what happened to Felix Leiter, and, you know, that's off scene. That's not described. But
Absolutely.
Bond's, and what you were saying, Ian, about Bond's friendship with Felix, how Bond is really cut up over it.
Yeah, affects him.
Well, it's quite horrific, actually, when he finds Felix in his room. That's really a tough moment.
And then the reveal when he takes on the robber at the warehouse, that there's the trap door that Bond is supposed to fall through, and doesn't. Gets the robber. That was a good scene. It was like another good action scene that was well done.
Yeah. Well, the robber's a great character, I think, because when they meet him, I mean, he's clearly a criminal and he's a really evil person. Just the fact that he shoots an innocent pelican, doesn't he?
That's right.
The man,
Yes,
the man doesn't care. He's got no guilt, no conscience. He shoots a pelican just to sort of show that he's a tough guy. He's really evil. Very good character.
I mean, it's remarkable to me. We're almost 45 minutes into this, that it is a fairly short book. It's a quick, speedy read. And yet there is so much packed into it. And I think that's why it's a solid novel here, because the chapters are short, they're quite compressed. Fleming's sweep, I think, is more in evidence here than in Casino Royale. It's a page turner. You want to read it. You want to get to that next chapter and find out.
Oh, absolutely, because I think Casino Royale is a thinner book, isn't it?
Yeah.
From memory. And this, although it's slightly longer, you're right. You finish a chapter and you just want to keep going. It is a real page turner. And I think it's really clever the way he does that. So you do read it pretty quickly. But you're right. He does put a lot in there. It's packed with, action, travel, adventure. He's got the lot, really.
Well, compared to other thrillers that I've been reading, I mean, if you read sort of Dennis Wheatley, if you read Hammond Ince, sort of John Creasy novels, etc., etc., I think that Fleming is really operating at a different level from a literary perspective. I think he's producing a more literary thriller. Although they aren't long books, they're substantial in terms of content. And
there's no waste there, is there?
No, there's no fat on them at all.
No.
Although I did get a bit bored by the voodoo descriptions. Maybe it's just me. I know it was important to
It's just you.
I was just like, oh, come on.
I quite liked the voodoo descriptions, actually.
I did. Yeah.
I thought that there's a risk here of slipping into pathos, because when you start dealing with the supernatural, but he connected it very much to the indigenous fear of voodoo that exists in Jamaica, and which exists, in parts of America.
Yeah.
I also enjoy how Fleming's having fun. There are a lot of hat tips, and the one I picked out was when they check into the hotel under the name Bryce.
Yes.
And of course, his good mate is Ivor Bryce.
Ivor Bryce.
Well, he did that train journey with Ivor Bryce that he described. That's
right.
He did that with him prior to the
43.
War. Yeah.
So that I thought that you could tell Fleming's having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And Ivor Bryce's middle name is Felix, I think.
Correct. It is.
A lot of those names come from his friends. Yeah. It's very clever.
I wonder if we'll see more of that if he writes any more.
Hopefully,
We should talk about Quarrel, the Cayman Islander, because of course the story then moves to Jamaica. Ian, what were your thoughts on Quarrel?
I like him. I like him a lot. He's, I think I've seen it described as a relationship between a Scottish laird and his head stalker. That kind of, Bond is in command. Quarrel works for him, but at the same time, there's a kind of mutual respect. They're helping each other, and I like the whole training regime that Quarrel puts him into. To get, apart from he doesn't give up cigarettes, but he cuts down.
Down to 10 a day.
Yeah, cuts down, gives up the booze, which must have been amazing for Bond.
Yeah.
And he gets him swimming and running, and he's getting fitter, and he's getting a bit of a tan. He's, acclimatizing to Jamaica. And I think Quarrel's just a very likable kind of ally, and hopefully we'll see him again.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
He was almost acting like a tour guide, wasn't he, when he was describing the Undertaker's Wind, for instance?
Yes.
They're nice touches, aren't they?
He did act as a tour guide for Jamaica, and I thought it was a very nice touch. He described Jamaica beautifully in the book, and Quarrel was a conduit to do that. But I think as a character, he stands up well. I mean, he's clearly he's described as one of the sort of best swimmers and best fishermen in Jamaica, and he's a good ally for Bond, and I thought he was a good character. We also met as well Strangeways in the
Station J, is it?
The station head.
Yeah.
who I think was referred to fleetingly in Casino Royale because part of his cover was from Jamaica.
Well spotted. Well spotted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we meet him properly in Live and Let Die. I think he's a great character with his eye patch and
Yeah.
the way that Bond says that he warms to him instantly because he's not put out that somebody else is on his patch. He's not disturbed by the fact that the man from head office has come to help, you know?
Yeah.
Which is normally a problem in any business.
Yeah.
That was good. And the whole Jamaica end of it, I thought was, for me, perhaps the highlight of the novel.
Yeah.
Why was that? Why was it your highlight, David?
Well, apart from the fact that I love Jamaica, I just thought that the way that he describes it, you know, the way that he describes the climate, the way that he describes the beaches, the way that he describes the people. I mean, the whole essence of Jamaica, Fleming captures very well. Obviously, we know that he loves it because he spends 3 months of the year there. I think the island, which is a made-up island, Surprise Island, which is Mr. Big's lair in Jamaica, is actually based on a real island as well, close to where Fleming got married. So, you know, he describes Jamaica incredibly well. And
absolutely,
I love that end of it. Yeah,
and that's great because, you know, a big part of the appeal for me is reading about the US and Jamaica. I've never been to Jamaica, but you know, when you've read Casino Royale, where it's set in London and Kent, very familiar places, it's really nice to read a novel that takes you out of your familiar area and puts you into somewhere far more exotic, where you're learning about different people, the way they live, their culture. And I found that fascinating. And he does depict Jamaica in a very positive way. And I think it's great that he has Quarrel to kind of like explain about the Undertaker's Wind and all those elements.
Yeah.
It's a reason for adding a bit of travel writing to it. And I think that's an element he should carry on with.
Oh, it's intoxicating. Yeah.
And I think I'm very lucky that I've got to spend a bit of time in the US, David. You've been to Jamaica. And what I particularly like is the way he describes the US is very accurate. So that I'm trusting Fleming with the ways he's describing Jamaica, even though I imagine it being like that. This isn't some guy just fantasy image of a location. You know, he's being again using his reporter's eye for detail. So I'm trusting him that that's how it's like.
Yeah, well, it goes to his journalistic background.
Yes,
and it goes. I mean, his elder brother is a travel writer, and Fleming.
Peter.
Yeah, and Fleming with his job with Reuters, etc. He's travelled extensively. He's excellent at describing places. Yeah,
he's also describing underwater scenes that I have no familiarity with. I mean,
that's based in no small part on his own personal experience, because evidently Fleming himself was scuba diving with Jack Cousteau. Yeah, and he got a lot of that end of it and that expertise from him. And I thought that the underwater scenes were phenomenally well described.
I kept thinking that I didn't know he had expertise underwater. And I think it's almost like the way he describes the card games. You know, if you're not familiar with card games, he walks you through it, he describes it so you feel like you understand it. And
it's so much detail, isn't it? There's a lot of detail in there, and you feel yourself underwater, and you have that fear of that, you know, the darkness and the unknown and what's out there, what's going to attack you.
Barracudas.
Squids, barracudas.
Well, strangely enough, when I was in Jamaica snorkeling, I was attacked by a Portuguese man of war. So I have got an experience of that. Yeah. And he describes those sort of instances very well.
Yeah.
No, it was. It's really, the underwater sequence was fantastic. I thought him putting a limpet mine on Fleming's. On Mr. Big's yacht was spoke to a personal experience of Fleming that I alluded to right at the very beginning of this, when you asked me, did I think that any of this was based on Fleming's personal experience? That aspect, I think, was, because I think it was something that they worked with a lot in the assault group that Fleming was involved with, during the war. So that certainly, together with the scuba diving end of it, had a real life heritage from Fleming. And I thought that was very good, and that was exceptionally well done. And I also thought at the very end that the keel hauling scene was great as well.
What I liked about the limpet mine was he had to kind of guess how long to set the fuse for the timing, and then in that scene where Mr. Big does his big villain speech at them both, and tells them what their method of death is going to be, which again is very sadistic.
Yes.
And Bond is in his head going, well, crikey, when's that mine going to ignite, detonate? Where are we going to be in the water? He's having to do all these calculations in his head.
And building the suspense the whole time.
It's not like,
the timing of it was fortuitous.
That's lucky, wasn't it? Very lucky.
Yeah. But I think the great thing about it is that when you're reading these two books, and this being the second, you forgive these things because it's so well done. The chances of Mr. Big deciding to keel haul Bond just at the moment that the bomb is going to go off, at the right hour, the right minute, the right second to play, the odds are extremely long. But you ignore all of that, and
you do. And
he's what he's brilliant at.
I'm also pleased he didn't over-exaggerate on the training scenes, where he says he's swimming 2 miles. Because I was reading about that fellow up in Oxford, Bannister. He reckons he's going to break a 4-minute mile this year.
No way. Can't be done. Can't be done.
I mean,
no chance.
At least with Fleming, this is realistic training. If he'd said Bond runs a 4-minute mile, you'd be like, whatever.
Well, on 60 moorland a day, I'm surprised that he can walk.
He's cut down to 10, right?
He's cut down to 10. So he's probably fitter now.
Yes, he's all right.
But going back to the keel hauling sequence, it's such a bizarre way to kill somebody off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why not just shoot them?
Yeah, but I think it ties in really well with the pirate theme.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that just made it such a rich adventure, really.
Yeah, and not a bad way to go. You're strapped to a naked solitaire. You're going to be ripped to shreds over the reef and then eaten, basically. I'd rather that than the Casino Royale torture scene, I must admit.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't consummate the relationship with your broken finger,
not with that finger, no.
After you've been keel hauled.
Yeah, but his arm was in a sling, David. His arm was in a sling. In fairness,
okay, that probably explains it then.
Yeah.
But what I liked about that whole scene is Bond's thinking when he actually says, if they were still alive when the first shark's fin showed on the surface behind them, Bond had coldly decided to drown Solitaire. And then he goes into detail about how he would drown her.
Yes.
Is that the gentlemanly thing to do? I guess so.
It's the noble thing to do, I guess. It's an odd way of looking at it, but it's classic Bond, isn't it?
But also, it is part of that suspense, though, because this is not like the hero who's just thinking, I'll get out of this. He's basically saying, we're done for here. I'm going to have to kill her first. I don't want her to suffer. And not thinking about himself first.
That's good.
Adds to the suspense. And
it's very interesting that we're having this discussion actually in this way, because as we did last time with Casino Royale, particularly with Jeremy, there were a lot of he was at pains to pick all of the holes in the plot, and we inevitably finish up going down some of the same route. But isn't it marvelous that when you're reading Fleming, you don't actually feel any of this. You just move through it. And it's only when you sit back afterwards,
analyze it,
sort of conversation, you think, well, maybe this was a little far-fetched or whatever, or maybe this is completely ridiculous. But the skill of him as a writer, you just completely, or at least I do, I completely ignore that. I just sort of move through it, you know?
I agree. I mean, that you can see plot holes, but it doesn't matter because it's enjoyable. It's entertaining you, and it's escapism.
Fun. Yeah, so much fun.
And Jeremy was invited to join us on this, but he did a better deal with the cousins. I think he was on something else talking about Live and Let Die. So hopefully we'll see more Jeremy in the future. But I honestly think about picking holes. You can't have a suspenseful adventure book without some holes, right? I mean, it's an adventure book at the end of the day.
Yeah. It has to be exaggerated, doesn't it, really? It's not like real life. It has to have an element of fantasy and certain things that wouldn't happen.
Albeit, if you read sort of Conrad's The Secret Agent, which is in many regards, up until now, considered to be one of the definitive espionage books. There are no holes in The Secret Agent. I mean, that is really the real deal.
Yeah.
Is it as exciting?
No.
As Fleming? Absolutely not. No.
I mean, the time flies by when you read a Fleming novel. Let's be honest. You sit down with a cup of tea, and next thing, 3 hours has gone by.
Yeah.
And you've enjoyed the read. What did we think of that finale, that end scene with Mr. Big gets his comeuppance?
I like it. It's fun. It's a bit mad, but it works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you needed that.
What I would say is it does feel like the ending is the kind of climax and ending feels like it's slightly faster than you want. You want it to carry on going, don't you? But it happens very quickly. Big's dead, but it's a great scene.
And Bond cries.
Yeah.
The first tears since his childhood came into James Bond's blue-grey eyes and ran down his drawn cheeks into the blood-stained sea.
Yeah.
Again, making him more human, not robot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. I enjoy. Go ahead, David.
No, I remember him crying, but I can't quite remember why.
Just getting out of that scrape, you know.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean,
had an emotional moment.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
The only character that I would love to hear more about and learn more about, because clearly he has loyalty for him. In this book and the last one, we don't get to find out much about him. Is M?
Yeah,
I was going to say
fleeting appearance.
Yeah.
Very strong character and very likable in an odd way, because he's this kind of stern father figure almost, and he's ex-military. He's a man. He's obviously very intelligent and knows what he's doing, but you don't really get much of an insight into his personality, do you?
No.
And hopefully that's a character that will be expanded upon later.
Well, word has it, because I have some advanced intelligence, so that we're not fooled again. Evidently, as we are speaking, the third one has been written and will be out next year. So we'll have to reconvene to discuss that.
Excellent.
Evidently, it's about some idiot with a rocket or something like that. But maybe we'll hear more about M in that.
Maybe.
That would be good.
And
Moneypenny as well.
Yeah,
I'd certainly like to hear a lot more about Miss Moneypenny.
Yeah.
So my last question, I've actually got 2 questions, but my last question about the book for you both is, if you're talking to a mate down the pub and you're telling me you discovered this guy Fleming and they're intrigued, would you give them a copy of Casino Royale or Live and Let Die?
Live and Let Die for me. Definitely.
I would say Live and Let Die as well.
Yeah. Because I hope that's more the direction that the books go into from now on.
Yes.
I think Casino Royale is great just to establish the character, but I don't think you necessarily have to read that first. I think you can read this first and then go back to Casino Royale. I think this is the stronger one and probably has more mass appeal, I would say.
Yeah, well, rumor has it he's becoming a very important author for Jonathan Cape.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it could well be that Live and Let Die sets the future tone, the future direction.
Yeah, I would agree with you both. I think if you read this one, it's an adventure, it's suspenseful. then I'd be intrigued to go and check the one out before it, and
Absolutely,
accept that it's not as fast paced. And I think that,
but it's so well written, and it's a clever book.
It is.
But another bit of intelligence that I have, because it's going to occur this year, it's in a couple of months' time, evidently. We were having a discussion as to whether Bond would make it to the screen, and thought, well, maybe not, maybe there's nothing in that idea. But evidently, there's an American television production, a play coming out of Casino Royale that we'll be able to see this year, you know, and it could have a big impact in the UK, because evidently rumor has it that 25% of households have now got one of these machines, you know, so that could be good.
Well, I think this one in particular would make a great TV show or a movie, as opposed to Casino Royale. There's so much action in it, and locations, and you know, I think this would be a really good watch.
Yeah,
but I think it would need more than one episode, because I think there's so much going on. I think you could probably get 2 or 3 hours of TV out of this, so maybe 2 or 3 episodes. The only drawback, I would say, is if you made a film of it, if they could ever do that, at least that would be in colour. I mean, I know apparently there is such a thing as a colour TV, which may come into become the norm in a couple of decades' time or whatever.
That's about as realistic as Bannister bringing the 4-minute mile.
Well, you never know. Maybe 30, 40 years' time, people may have colour TVs. It may become the norm.
But they've got them in St. Petersburg, evidently. the oldsters have got them in St. Petersburg. So they could be coming our way sometime soon.
This would also work as a radio adaptation. I think it'd be a great radio as well.
Yeah.
Wireless
adaptation.
Yes. So
wireless adaptation.
Wireless.
Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, because, you know, I've only got so much money in the meter here for the electric car in Wales. There's another big event happening this year.
Yeah.
The 1954 World Cup. Predictions? Who's going to win that?
Ooh, Brazil?
David? Who's your money on?
I've changed my mind. Uruguay.
I'm thinking them Hungarians, that Puskás.
Oh, Puskás, pretty good, isn't it?
But them Germans, I mean, you know, despite
never right off
West Germany are going to be up there. I think the Hungarians. Not sure about England this time, and I don't rate Scotland. Chances.
No, I think England are in with a good shot. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wales in it.
Let's hope we don't have to wait another 12 years. Yeah.
Not in it. Got a good young team coming through, though. I reckon we might make the next one in Sweden in 58.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Marvelous. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about Live and Let Die. I'd love to welcome you back onto future episodes of the James Bond Book Club. And you can find the links and show notes for today at spybrary.com/126. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.